the Amazing Women Speak podcast, inspiring and motivating every Black woman to own, honor, and execute her amazing, individually and collectively, as it was established at birth.
Good evening, and happy Sunday. I'm Crystal Gunn, and welcome to another episode of Amazing Women Speak. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for those who have been riding with us from the beginning, and thank you to those who have found us in this season 4. Stick around. I promise you, you will be inspired. And while you're getting settled in for the show today, hit the share button and share Amazing Women Speak so your friends and followers can get in on this conversation. It is going to be a good one. Last month was Financial Planning Awareness Month, and this month is Long-Term Care Awareness Month. And it is just the two of us today. So, Michele, come on in here and let's talk about getting your financial house in order.
Hello. Good evening. One of the conversations that most of us don't like to have, but it's necessary for us to have. And so even though we are out of, by calendar, Financial Planning Month, as we get ready to enter into the holidays, it is important to have these conversations and pay attention to the way that we think about our money. So we invite you, for whatever platform you are joining us from, to be a part of this conversation. Drop your comments, drop your questions in the chat, and we will pull you in virtually to be a part of this important conversation. So I say every week, fastest hour of your day, we are going to dive right in. And not like unlike any other week or like any other time that we join together, going to start with the question. We launch deep because we have no time for shallow waters. Crystal Gunn, let's talk financial planning, financial strategy, the importance of. Want to talk a little bit about you first. Why do you do what you do? How did the journey that you took land you here?
That really is. I'm sorry. That really is a great question, and full transparency, right? You know how you coasting along in life. I had the career, had that vice president of a credit union, left that, opened a mortgage company with my husband at the time, and mortgage industry crashes. We had been divorced at that point a couple years, and yeah, my whole world, just financial world, flipped upside down. And going through my own financial storm at that time and having to figure it out, not knowing, not having the answers, not being in that place before, not having people like me and social media where you had all of these people online talking about all of the things, right? I had to figure it out. I had to trust God. And coming out of it, because not while I was in the storm, but coming out of it, I realized I had to go through the storm in order to help others go through that storm. And then somewhere in there, it just became a passion and a calling. And it was like, yeah, this is one of the things that you are supposed to do in life. So I just try to be obedient with that thing.
Definitely, obedience is your thing. And so let's get to it. We're all still reeling from, or many of us still reeling from what happened on Tuesday, November 5th.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why is because what's been looming out there around Project 2053, right? So what do we need to know? What do we need to be thinking about? How do we settle our fears and concerns around what may be happening?
So, one thing that my mother said leading up to this election, she says, we really need to be worried about what we as individuals are going to do, right? Because we know anytime there's an election, this one far more than any that I can ever imagine, there are things that are said, some true, some not true. But I think at the end of the day, one of the things at this point we have to do is watch what plays out, but most importantly, get our own financial houses in order, right? And
Mhm.
so we talked about his agenda, Project 2025. I personally what like to look at that prediction of the year 2053, which states if the current financial trend continues. In this article, I saw it in the article, had to be 2014, 2015. If the current financial trend continues, despite the fact by the year 2053, people of color will be the majority population, Blacks will have zero wealth. And that's the other part of why I go so hard in the paint around financial education. Because when I think about how old my child will be in 2053 and hopefully married with a child or two, like I can't imagine my child's, my guy babies having, my future grandbabies having zero wealth. And I think we really have to, at some point, I believe, we got to focus on us. You know what I mean? Like we really got to focus on us. And it goes back to we are missing too many of the fundamentals financially as a people. And yes, we can continue to talk about the systemic racism and all of that because that is there. But some of these things that we don't have in place have nothing to do with that. Not anymore. And so, yeah, I think we just got to do something different. And it starts with us in our own homes.
So how do we change? How do we change the path? Right. I need you to talk a little bit about history.
Yeah.
Which is why we think about money the way that we do, how we think about savings the way that we do. So take us a step back before we move forward.
For sure. So, I always say, any and every workshop I do, anytime I'm on someone's podcast talking about finances, I always state the fact, and I have to give this because there's part of it that we have to give ourselves some grace, right? Everyone has a personal financial relationship. Wasn't defined by you, doesn't work in your favor. It was defined by what we inherited generationally, and I'm not talking about assets. All of those thoughts, beliefs, traumas, all of that has been passed down generationally, that's now basically coded in our DNA. So when you look at that historical context, let's talk about slavery. Our labor was exploited, so we didn't earn any income. So if we don't have any income, we don't know how to save and budget. And then post-emancipation, now we have some income. It's barely enough. We're paying the bills. So we're just paying those bills. And today, when I talk to a lot of people and I ask about their budget and they show me their budget, the only thing that's really on there are the bills. So that extra money, right? We're not being intentional with it. And then what did we see growing up? What were we taught? What were we not taught? What were we told? What did we overhear? What other traumas in life were we trying to be, the cool kid in school? So we bought all of the designer clothes. And now the only thing that we have are these designer clothes in our adult life. Who let us down? Social media, music, movies, all of that outside of us defining our personal financial relationships. It doesn't work in our favor. And one of the biggest things that I push is how, in order to stop that prediction, we got to heal and redefine our personal financial relationships.
So when you say that, right, like I think about, and you say it all the time, right? When we think about relationships, our relationship to money also has this frame to it. And now hearing you talk about the historical context, right? Like it's been coded in our DNA. How do we break? How do we change? How do we redefine how we think about our relationship with money, right? If my demonstration of wealth has been taught to me by the outward expression, the cars, the homes, the clothes, right? Like the jewelry. If that's been taught to me, which then puts me in a position where we're thinking about 2053, where we will have no wealth as a Black people, how do I begin? And how do I get past the fear of, as an adult in my 40s, 50s, that it's not too late to change the way that I have been thinking about my money historically?
So one question that I always ask is, how do you want to live the rest of your life from this day forward? And usually when I ask people that question, I get some variation of, I never thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, right? And so that winds up being the first thing. You got to really think about how you want to live the rest of your life and what's important to you. So if you hear this prediction, or even if you don't, right? Let's say you've never even heard that 2053 prediction. Let's just say you've seen enough on social media. You've experienced enough of it that people have died and not had life insurance, and we had to do GoFundMe's and couldn't have a service, or people are passing a pot in order to be able to have a service for somebody. You've heard people not have the estate planning, wills, trust accounts. You've heard it enough to say, wow, I don't have any of these either.
Right.
So, or, which we'll get into the long-term care, wiping out the wealth of a family because we haven't planned for something that is that possibility. So I think we got to want something different, and we got to determine what's important to the individual without, like you said, the cars and all of that. If that's important to you, that's fine. But what else is important to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because it has to be something more than just those things that aren't appreciating in value.
So let's break them down,
Yep.
right? Let's first talk about life insurance, right?
Yes.
So it is one of the ways that I can leave wealth to my
Yes.
children, right? And so there's term life, there's whole life.
Mhm.
There is life insurance that I can get through my job. There's supplemental life insurance policies that I can get through my job and that I can get separately, right?
Absolutely.
Like, help us understand why life insurance is so important, and what are some of your recommendations about what kind of policy I should go get?
So, yeah. So first of all, great question. I am a licensed life insurance agent. This is my jam, as they say. I love all of this, right? So, yep, term life, permanent life. I always say if you only have, if you have insurance through your job, it can't be the only life insurance that you have, and you should consider it the and one. It's the extra point in basketball, right?
Okay, so I want to slow it down,
Yep.
right? Okay, so first I want to talk a little bit about language. So I said term and whole, and you said permanent life.
Yeah,
Is
sorry.
permanent life and whole life the same thing?
Yeah, well, so yes, because it's considered whole life, and then you have some people are now hearing the term index universal life. They both fall under permanent, meaning they will last to age 102, 105, somewhere in there. Where term is, 10-year, 15-year, 20, 25, or 30-year term policies.
Okay.
So with term, it's nothing but the death benefit. That's what it is. It's all it is, right? Whatever that face value death benefit is, that is what your beneficiaries would get. With permanent insurance, in most instances, it's building a cash value. So when you are, when you're paying that monthly premium,
Mm-hmm.
part of that premium goes into building the cash value in that policy that you can borrow from, use later in life. You've heard people say, oh, I started this business, I put $100,000 from my life insurance policy in order to be able to do that, right? That's from that cash value in that life insurance policy. So permanent policies in general build that cash value. And you can, in addition to that monthly premium, you can put extra money in there. And so you're earning, way better interest than you're earning with that money sitting in the bank. Yeah.
Okay. So then you talked about insurance through my job, right? And supplemental insurance, right? Like, so most folks, right, like when it's time for early enrollment,
Mhm.
you can get the life insurance for your job and you can also get supplemental.
Mhm.
Is that the plus one you're talking about? Or should I then still go out and get another policy that's outside of the structure of my job?
Oh, you got to have it outside of the structure of your job, because
Why that's important.
what if you get laid off? What if you quit? What if the company shuts down? Right? Now, most people don't look at their life insurance that they get through their job to even know if it's portable, meaning if I no longer work for this company, can I take it with me?
Great point.
Right? So now, if it's not portable, and sometimes if it is portable, you then also have to look at what does the cost become when I'm no longer employed here? Does the price go up? Because when we have life insurance and health insurance through our jobs, it's a group policy. So it tends to be a lower premium because it's a group policy. So you then have to look at, if I take it with me, if I have that option, is it more expensive now that I no longer work here? In addition, let's say that you only have it through your job. You no longer work there, so you no longer have insurance because it wasn't portable, or you didn't take it with you if it was, and something happens. Even if you leave that job today to start a new job tomorrow, 90 days is that typical rule, right? Before you can
Right.
get benefits with that
Right.
employer. Now you have this time period where you have no insurance.
That's a great point.
And one of the factors that determines the cost of insurance is age, right? So if I've had it earlier, the earlier the better. It stays, especially if it's a permanent policy. The monthly premium doesn't go up. So yeah, you got to have something outside of. It's a must.
Really great information, and I hope our listeners are taking this in, to have this wealth of knowledge available to you for free to really help you get to thinking about the importance of. Um, and so, right now, Crystal, as folks are hearing you and they're thinking, okay, I need to go and get some additional life insurance, do you recommend folks get term or permanent?
That is a great question. And much like I say about the rest of your financial situation, it depends on the individual, right? Ideally, a permanent policy is the best thing that's out there, because you get it today, the premium isn't going to change, right? However, depending upon when you get it, age, also health, what does that premium look like, and does it fit into your budget, right? Plus, what are you trying to do with the insurance? So you may have a mix of, I got this at work, that's the and one, extra
Mhm.
point. I do have a permanent policy. I just bought a house. Okay, you should get a term policy to protect that asset. So if you just got a 30-year mortgage, $250,000, go get a $250,000 term policy, because typically term policies are relatively inexpensive. That will be used specific to pay off that mortgage, to protect that asset in case of your death, so that your loved ones now don't have that debt on that property. And so it just kind of, it really depends. Some people will tell you, you'll hear people say, oh no, you should only get, but I don't think it's a cookie cutter solution. I think it's going to be different for what everybody needs in their own, when they're creating their financial plan for themselves and their family.
Which is why everyone at some point should have a conversation with a financial strategist, right? There's so much that we don't know. And it's the reason why folks specialize in the things that they specialize in, right?
Right.
So that you can build a relationship with someone who is paying attention, who it is their jam to talk about, and that you're going to get the information that you need to be able to make the best decisions for your family, because it is not cookie cutter and it is connected to other things, right? Like, it's just not about life insurance only, which I know that we could spend the next 40 minutes talking about all of the variations, and there's still some other buckets. And while we think about life, we also have to think about death. So let's talk about wheels for a minute, right?
Okay.
So again, like, folks, drop your questions. I hope you're taking notes, because this is a conversation that is necessary for your life and for the life of your children's and your children's children. So let's talk about wills. Historically, in the Black community, it's not something that we have done. One, because the mindset, I don't have enough wealth to be thinking about. Why is it important to have a will? And is there a financial level that one has to be at in order to think about the importance of a will?
So I'm started with a statistic which says a little over 70% of African Americans don't have a will, right? So
70%.
yes, do not have a will.
Zero.
Now, does everybody need a will? No. But you really need to talk to somebody in order to, because I know some people will say, oh God, again, not cookie cutter. Depends on what it is that you're doing, right? But if you have not put other things in place, right? So let's just say you haven't put other things in place and you die without a will, you die intestate. That means you did not have a will. And you have to go to probate, right? You got to go to probate court. And the judge is going to divvy up your assets, how small of assets you have, or however many you have. They're going to divvy them up based on the state law, not what you necessarily want. So let me give you an example. Let's say you had a property. Let's just say you owned it free and clear because you had a term policy that paid that mortgage off, right?
Okay.
So you own this property free and clear. And let's say you wanted this child A to get the property, right? And you wanted child B to get some money because child B already had owned a home, right?
Okay.
You don't have that anywhere written. So when they go to probate, the judge may say, okay, well, based on this state law, we just have to sell this property, right? And split the assets. Or we got to split the assets of you don't get to determine who gets what. It's going to be divided by the state law. And it can vary from state to state. So that's one reason why you need it. The other reason why you need it is because, as a really good friend of mine calls it, it's no fuss at the funeral, right? And we know people can start fussing. And legally, when someone dies, we are not supposed to remove anything from their property until it's been cataloged, part of the estate, and a will, or it has gone to probate. And we know that don't happen in our community. We going in and taking whatever, and you know, such and such wanted me to have. Did they though? Right? And then people are fighting. And remember, average house has 300,000 items in it. So everyone has an estate, right? Mm-hmm. And if you have to go to probate, if you have a will, let me say this, if you have a will, you're going to probate. You're going to probate with or without a will.
Okay.
But with the will, what you want is going to happen, right? So yeah, it's just, again, no fuss at the funeral. It helps.
So getting a will.
Yep.
Can I write down my wishes on a piece of paper? Go have it notarized.
You can write it down on a piece of paper. I suggest you have it notarized and dated so that they know this is the last will. This is the most recent will. I know there was a thing when Aretha Franklin died that they found all of these different things that she had written, who she wanted to have what, and it becomes in question, well, did this one predate that one and all of that? So yeah, I would suggest any of those documents, you definitely want to have them notarized.
Okay. Is that the best route? Well, I'm not going to ask that because I know the answer to that one. It's not necessarily the best route, right? Like, do I go on and Google will.com and fill that form out and pay the $99 or whatever that is, right? Like, what is the best way to approach that reduces the amount of fuss that a family might have to experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many different ways. Like I'm a agent for Legal Shield, and Legal Shield will do your powers of attorney and your will for free, right? You can also, if you're using AI on any form, you can ask AI to, create the document for you. Again, you can go to LegalZoom. You also can go to, an outside attorney, you know what I mean? And then pay whatever that cost is. So there's so many different ways to get it. The first thing you want to do is start taking inventory, though. Like, what is it? Who do you want to have what, because whoever you use to put your will together, that information is needed. So yeah, it's so many different ways. If you yeah, you can probably also just like Google will template. Like there's so many ways out there to get it. You just want to make sure it's detailed. Again, signature, witness, and I would say notary.
So the biggest importance is whatever platform, whatever way,
Get
have
it.
a way versus nothing at all.
And if you decide, and again, this is why that conversation is so important, right? If you decide that you don't want to have a will, okay, well, there are things that we need to put in place. And I always use myself as an example. Papa died in 2017. They own their house free and clear. Mom added me to the deed. She doesn't have a will, but she doesn't need one. I'm on the deed. She dies. I have ownership in the property.
Right.
We are the beneficiaries of all of her investment accounts. So again, we know where the money is going. So if you choose not to have a will, you still need to make sure, and she knows we're not going to feud and fuss over the things in the house, right? My brother doesn't want her, you know what I mean? Her fur coats, like and her jewelry, right? So it's also very beneficial to have a conversation, even if you decide to do the will by yourself or however, it winds up being like, do you need a will? I've heard people say, well, everyone needs one. I do. I go to a senior facility, and like everyone in that, they don't need a will. They don't own property. Some of them don't even have a car. They don't need a will. They just need to make sure they have some life insurance, that whoever the beneficiaries are, the information for the bank accounts, they just need to make sure that stuff is done. So having a conversation with somebody who can ask you the questions so that you can map out the plan and what documents you need in your estate planning.
Okay, so then again, another topic that we could talk about for the remainder of our time. So I am going to say, right, like very transparent moment, my chat is not working right. So I want to make sure that we're not missing any questions if you can see it on your end.
It's not. Everything says Facebook user. So I don't know who's saying what. I'm going to actually go online and see if I can see something different. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So talked a little bit about life insurance, and all of this is drive-by, right? And so as you are taking a peek at that, Crystal, how can folks reach you? I'm going to say this a couple of times because it is a lot of information, and some folks may need or have questions that did not get lifted up here today, or they're deciding like, I need to take that first step. How can folks get a hold of you?
Yep, you can email me at crystal@crystalgunn.com. I just put it in the chat. So yeah, definitely email me. And then I can send you a link that you can just schedule a time at your convenience, because I do free wills, insurance, POAs, consultations, because it's so important.
And so that's where we're going next, POAs.
Yes, power of attorney.
Right? We think about life insurance, right? Like we think about death and wills. What happens to me when I'm living and I'm no longer able to make decisions on my own? Talk to us about the importance of POAs.
Yeah, so power of attorney basically allows someone to act on your behalf if you are incapacitated or not around. So there's a medical directive, and then you can have a durable power of attorney. So let's just go if you're ill and cannot make decisions for yourself. That power of attorney, you've appointed an agent, if you will, that can that knows your wishes. That's the part that's really important. They know your wishes from a medical standpoint, and they will carry out your wishes on your behalf because you are an adult, right? If someone doesn't have that power of attorney, your wishes may not get carried out, right? Because the hospital or the doctor is gonna decide. And so then on the financial side, same thing. If someone is incapacitated, let's say, your sister is in in the hospital and can't get out, can't do, is not able to even go online and take care of any type of financial information. You have that power of attorney. If you needed to pay her bills, if you needed to get money out of her account, you can then take that to the bank and be able to get that information. Or let's say you don't live here. Military people have it. If they're shipped out and they're out of the country, they have a power of attorney who can take care of their financial information while they're gone. If I want to buy a house in another state, I live in California, I want to buy a property in Detroit, instead of me coming to a closing, I might appoint a power of attorney to use to do those closing documents for me.
And so do I need a separate one for each of those things that you talked about? Or can I designate through one POA an individual that handles my business?
Medical and durable, which would be financial.
Okay.
I would suggest doing both. And for that medical one, it might not be the people that's closest to you that you assign that agent, because they may not be able to carry out your wishes. Also, you want to make sure before you sign somebody that they know what your wishes are and say that they can do what it is that you want. Because you may have two children and one may say, I'm going to say, hook her up to every machine, keep her alive forever, where the other one is like, no, we don't want to do that. So you want to make sure who can actually follow through with my wishes.
So I know you have this goal, right, around WIPs.
Wills, insurance, and powers of attorneys.
Yeah, talk to us about that goal and why that's so important to you.
So the goal is 3,000 wills, insurance, powers of attorney each year in our community, right? And so I can touch 3 with just one individual if they don't have any, right? But it's so important because as we look at the numbers, we're lacking. But also when you think about that 2053 prediction, how do we pass down wealth? How do we do that if we're not protecting the wealth and the assets that we have? We can't pass those down. And we then don't have control over our finances.
Right.
So that's huge for me. Yeah.
So yearly, I go get a physical. Yearly, I go get my eyes checked. I go to the dentist every 6 months. What is my financial checkup? What does that look like? How often should I review my documents, meet with you to have documents reviewed? What does a financial checkup look like?
So a financial checkup is just like what you just said, right? It is just like that, except, just like the dentist, just like going to the doctor, except we're talking about your finances. And it's funny that you brought that up, because I actually have a thing called financial checkup that you can do. And it's an hour, whatever your questions are about whatever it is, we're going to talk about it. If you need to tweak something, I'm going to tell you that. If you're doing a great job, just like they do at the doctor, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. Pat you on your back, send you on your way. Right. But it allows you to say, okay, yep, I'm here. I'm good, but I think I could be better, but I don't know what to do. Because again, this is not what you do. You know what I mean? Like it's not what you do. So some people try to self-diagnose, right? But you know what I'm saying? So we're Googling the things, but yeah, it's that 1 hour checkup that says, yep, maybe if you just did this tweak, you would see that boosting your credit score that you're not seeing. Maybe if you did, okay, you got this new, you just bought a house. Well, let's talk about the insurance and how we can do the things. Just figuring it out and answering whatever questions you have. How often should you do it? At least once a year. At least once a year. And I want to go back, because that was a really great question about how often you should do a thing. You also should at least check your beneficiaries on your policies at least once a year, because, I always got a story. Young lady went to Florida. She died when she was in Florida. She had a life insurance policy. Her mother was the only beneficiary, and her mother had died a year before. And she never updated the policy, right? So the time when her family needed that money in order to have that funeral service for her, they can't get it, because now that life insurance is part of the estate and it has to go to probate. Wow. And we know that doesn't happen quickly. So I always say you should have at least two beneficiaries. They don't both have to be primary. One can be secondary, because when tragedy happens, she wasn't thinking about updating her beneficiary when her mom died. She didn't
Right.
even think about that, right? Because
Mhm.
she's thinking about the grief and all of that. So being able to go back and put it in your calendar, you know what I mean? Just like put it in your calendar. It's time to check this again. And yeah.
So I've got high school children. What do we think about, or what do you advise around getting policies on your children? We always think they're going to live forever, they're going to outlive us. And we all have a story where we have a friend or relative who has had to bury a child, and we had to rely on GoFundMe to be able to do that. When should we get policies on our children?
The moment they're born.
Hmm.
And so the interesting thing, you spoke about it, but from fatality, something happens, they die, I have to bury them. But the flip side of that is, remember, the younger you get insurance on someone, the less expensive the premium is. The second thing is, if now you have this baby is, a day old, you get a permanent policy that's building cash value.
Hmm.
The earlier you start, and the goal with those is to always overfund those policies. Now your child is 30 or 40 years old, and they have, 50, 60, $70,000 sitting in there that they can use because you used it for something more than just the death benefit.
And
So
here's the reason why you need a financial
yeah,
strategist, right? Like, who's telling us this? We don't know this in our communities, and we don't even know what questions we should be asking. And we think about death as it relates to our elders and growing old. And there's another benefit in getting that policy early, beyond just locking in that rate. That's really good information for folks to know. And again, a real reason why we need to be talking to someone and stop trying to figure this out and break the generational curses around not having these conversations. Everything stays private. You can't fix what you don't know.
you cannot. And what's interesting is when I do workshops and I talk about that, I remember just recently, as I talked about that part that we just talked about, life insurance, and someone said, I had no idea you could use life insurance for this. And this was someone grown with several children,
Right.
right? Because we don't know, and we don't know the questions to ask, which is also why we need to show up for financial education, right? And I know, again, the historical thing, there's the mistrust and all of that, but you still need to show up. We can't continue to hold on to that because it's negatively impacting us as a people and then in individual families. And I always say, you need to be thinking about the next 10 generations. And if you teach, every generation teaches the next to think about the next 10 generations, we're good. I saw there's this series on Netflix, but there was a part where the oldest son had to come home to their, great big estate. They had this great big mansion and acres and all of these properties on, smaller properties on this on all their acres. And he thought for a minute that he was going to have to sell the estate. And the attorney asked him, how long has this property been in your family? And he said 150 years. Grandma died. We trying to sell her house immediately because we want the
Right.
pennies of the house to go buy
Right.
more things that don't appreciate in value. Right? It's like, and I hear the stories. I think part of the reason that I am so passionate about this part of it is because I hear the stories over and over. You don't know how many times someone calls me because they are asking, how do I get a POA? But the person is in the hospital and they can't sign for it. So
Right.
it's, you can't get
Right.
one now.
Right.
Or I talked to a young lady who, two-family flat that was owned by her grandfather. Grandfather's been dead for 6 years. The house is never going to probate. So they can't pull money out of that house if they need to. They cannot, if they were behind on the property taxes, they can't go make any type of arrangements because they don't own the property. And so it's these sort of things that it's like we miss out lose assets and all of that because we won't take the time. And it's hard. We don't like to talk about our, we don't like to talk about that, but you have to talk about it sometime.
One way or the other, right? Like, yeah, from a space of we've got a plan, or a space of what are we about to do. Either way, the conversation is going to happen, and how do you stack the deck in your favor, right? Like, we just had a one of our guests drop in, like, I'm so glad my mom had a power of attorney. Like, I didn't have to make those decisions when it was time to let her go. It was her wish, and I didn't have to grapple with, do I or don't I, right? Like she said, stop trying to figure these things out. Have the conversations. It's not that we're trying to bury our folks any earlier. These are necessary conversations, and as uncomfortable it is for me to have a conversation with my girls about my passing, it's necessary to have it. And more of us have undiagnosed ailments, right? Like, we are inching ourselves closer and closer, whether we know it or not. And to empower your children with this information and to not have to make these challenging decisions on their own is a gift. It's a gift. So how do we start to overcome the fear, Crystal, that like at 55 or 50 or at 60, I haven't done these things and I'm too embarrassed to sit in front of someone and say, I haven't done these things. How do we overcome the fear? I ask that, and also offer to folks that are listening, you offer these workshops for free so many times. You can't sit in a room and hear it and not want to ask a question, right? Like, and not thinking about it. So one of the ways you can overcome your fear, I'm going to answer part of this question for you, is show up in a room. Start there.
Show up in the room, because you might not even have to ask the question, because
right?
I'm going to tell you, you know what I mean, before you even get there.
Or I'm going to be in the audience and I'm going to ask them from a place of not knowing, because I know there's always somebody in the room who wants to ask a question, who's embarrassed and doesn't know how to word it. Like, I'm always going to ask those questions so that folks can start thinking about, how do I turn this ship around? It's not too late. If I have breath in my body, it's not too late.
Yeah, it's definitely not too late. Always with all of these things, the earlier, the better, right? Usually at the end of a workshop or anything, anytime I'm talking about finances, I always end with give yourself some grace, right? Give yourself some grace and then some other things. But I also say you can give yourself some grace for what you didn't know yesterday. And so you didn't have it.
Right.
You've heard me talk about it today. You can't give yourself grace tomorrow for this same thing, because now you know, and you have to do something different, right?
Right.
And I chuckled when you were talking about having the conversation, because there is also this thing in our community. Listen, folks, because you get a life insurance policy, that's not speeding up someone's death. I promise you, it's not. Okay. We all have a date that we're going home to glory, but you getting that life insurance policy does not speed that date up.
Really good point. Really good point.
Yes.
So let's talk about generational wealth, right? I remember, I don't know what space I was in when somebody said, I may not be able to make my children rich in my life, but I can certainly make sure that they are rich in my death, or better off, or wealthier than, right? Which circles back to that life insurance policy and beefing it up in a way that extends beyond them just paying off my debt, that they then can think about how to invest that into what's coming next. So let's talk about generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a term in some spaces, Crystal, that I feel like that it's gotten so overused that it's lost its power and understanding. Talk to us about it.
So, and in that, I want to not even just the wealth piece, right? Let's just talk through a scenario. You got a couple and they have some children, right? Let's say you're the primary breadwinner, or you might not be the primary, meaning you don't make the most money, but your income in that house helps to run that house, helps to pay for all of the things. Well, now if you die, that income is no more. How does that just impact the daily living? Not even talking about just passing down some wealth, but how does that impact the daily living? So now you've left the spouse and children to grieve. Your income is no longer there. What is that going to do to them financially? Can they still afford this house? Can they pay this car notes? And that's why I said you got a house with a mortgage. That's why you need that term policy. Now that's paid off. You know what I mean? Using life insurance to protect the asset, which will also in turn protect your family. So now, okay, you made $100,000 a year. You just gonna leave them with $100,000? Right? That's gonna give them 1 year of your income, and you would be surprised how quick that money can go, right?
Right.
And so, not even about passing down a generational wealth, but just making sure that they can sustain if you're no longer here. Now, in addition to that, let's then leave them some money, right? So, why not when your child is born? I'm sorry, why not for them, one, get that? Because again, remember, life insurance and age. So somebody's out there saying, I'm, 55, a whole life policy is going to be more money for me. Yep, it probably will be, right? And it might be more than you can afford. So why not then pour that money into your child's? Because the younger you are, the less expensive it is. So why not then do that permanent policy on them to pour more money in there? Still making sure there's more than just enough to bury you in the policy that you have on you. So if I don't have the money and I'm not wealthy now and can't pass down this business or, this bank account full of all of this money, I can through that life insurance policy. So if I have $1 million life insurance policy on me, now I've passed down $1 million to this next generation.
Right.
But you can't just pass down the money. You also got to pass down the knowledge so that they then, remember, this generation needs to be thinking about 10 generations. So if you got them a policy when they were younger, right? And you got them a $500,000 or $1 million permanent policy, and it's really inexpensive because you got it when they were one, right? Now they're leaving, $1 million to their next generation. And so that's how we then wind up. And again, then protecting those assets. Okay, you're not selling these houses, right? You're not, I can't stress that one enough. Please hear me. Do not sell grandma's, aunties, your mama's house. I don't care if you have your own. Don't sell it. It's an asset. People always need to have a place to stay. You can pull money from it, from the equity. So many things that you can do with that property. Don't sell it.
Yeah, right. Like it's in our communities, right? Like we are thinking about the fast dollar in front of us. And so you said something, right? Like don't just pass the $1 million, pass the knowledge. And in that scenario, Crystal, the knowledge is even more important because if you can't handle $1,000 and be financially responsible for it, you certainly, like people always say, if I had more money, nope, you do the same thing you do with the money that you have now.
Absolutely.
Which is
Yep.
why that knowledge is so important. And having someone like you to talk to overcome the fear of what you don't trust and what you don't know. Like, what's the strategy in the Black community? Because ours is unique and different, right? Being able to talk to someone who is committed to understanding the importance of increasing the knowledge for our people is critical if we are going to be thinking about 10 generations, right? Like, how do I even get to generation one? And
Right.
passing that wealth to my children, like, what does that mean? And it's more than just not leaving them with your debt. It's the knowledge of how to continue to.
And people will say, and I've heard it, I'll be dead. I don't care about that debt. Again, are you thinking about those that are coming up behind you? Where you could put something in place that's, because don't think that the debt's just going to go away. Because remember, everybody has an estate. So when we go to court, are those creditors showing up like, run us our money?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's that asset protection part and all of that. We have to not be, I don't know, self-centered and selfish. We have to think, and it's again, I'm gonna die at some point, and it's called a death benefit, right?
Mhm.
So why wouldn't I want my child to benefit greatly if I can do it in this manner, if I have that option? And so I just think we just need to talk about it. And it's time out, y'all, for being, and I know this is easier said than done, but it's time out for being um fearful and embarrassed. And listen, I read the statistics. 70% of African American
Right.
adults lack any formal estate planning. You're not by yourself, and people not really even thinking about you like that. So you don't have to be embarrassed. And, it's also why I tell so much of my story. Like, the hardship can happen to anybody. It's like putting the things in place. Like, if I had had some other things in place, I probably wouldn't have had the financial storm that I had all of those years ago. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's the time out for being embarrassed and fearful and caring what's about what somebody thinks about you. They thinking about their own fire. They're not thinking
Right.
about yours.
Right. So I heard someone say once, worse than failure is avoidance.
You say it again.
Right. And so it's time for us to stop avoiding the critical, crucial conversations that need to be had in order for us to be able to plan for a better tomorrow. So, Chris, a question just popped in my head, and like, again, fastest hour of
Right.
your day. If I get a policy on my newborn child,
Mhm.
paying on it, and I pass away, can my child continue to pay on that policy for themselves?
So, yes. And so ideally you get a policy for a newborn child when that child turns 18. Now you can remain the owner, or then you can allow them to be the owner, right? And it goes back to training. What are we doing? Because you then want them to pay their premium, or you may continue to pay. Or in that case, you pass away, yes, that child can pay their own premium. And remember, if it's a permanent policy, the goal is to overfund it, right? So that it's gaining more interest. But yes, the short answer.
So tell us about that, right? Again, I'm always going to come from a place of not knowing. So when you say overfunded, what
Yeah.
does that mean?
So if the premium is $150
Mhm.
a month, right? But because you have an efficient and effective budget, because you've been to some of my workshops, right? You have a line item allocation for how much you're putting away for savings. And this is outside of if you have a 401, whatever. This is after you get paid, you got a line item allocation for how much money you putting in savings. And let's say you putting an extra $300 a month in savings. You've already paid that premium. Well, how much of that extra $300 that you're putting towards savings every month are you going to put in that life insurance policy?
Okay.
Because, it's earning interest at a higher rate than that bank account. So now it's earning, it's compounding, and it's growing again at a better rate and gearing them up. And you can get your money. So it's not like it's there and you don't have access to it. You can borrow from it, or you can just pull the money out and then not pay it back because it's yours. But I always say, don't, people talk about the term infinite banking, and that's really and truly what it is. So now I'm 30, I want to buy a new car, I got money sitting in my cash value. Instead of going to the bank to get a loan, I'm going to borrow the money from myself. Just pay yourself back, because it just makes sense to pay yourself back. But now you're not paying interest. That car loan isn't showing up on your on your credit report and all of those things. So yeah, overfunded for and again, strategy, right? And
Right.
that's why having the conversations are really important.
Yeah. And having them often. So again, I'm going to ask, how can folks find you?
Yep, crystalgunn.com, or you can email me at crystalgunn.com, because if you email me, and also I think there's some contact information in the description, but if you email me, I will send you the link so that you can schedule based on what you want and what you need. We got to talk about long-term care insurance though before.
Absolutely, right? Like
I'm looking at the
that's
time
what
like,
we're going to go for today, right? And we absolutely need a part B to this conversation. because I know there are folks out there that want to know about credit scores. I want to buy a house. So we're going to have this conversation part 2 when we can fit it in. So stay
Right.
tuned for that, because we know that that is information that you do want to know. As we wrap this conversation up, going full circle, let's talk about long-term care and the importance of it. And Crystal, if you can spend a little bit of time talking about short-term care, which is also an option that folks can get through their jobs as well.
So I know it's enrollment season.
Yes.
And with your employer, really take a look at what's being offered, right? Because again, it's group insurance, so it's going to be less expensive, right? So you want to take a look at what's being offered from when you start to talk about cancer policies, critical illness policies. You're starting to see them more and more through employer benefit packages. Most people don't take advantage of them, right? Take advantage of them. It's important. And I'll tell you why. If someone gets critically ill and they're sick for a while, it can totally put a family in financial ruin because it's expensive.
Right.
Like it's really, really expensive. So just giving some stats, a home health aid, and this is the average across America. Like it could be a little less in your area, could be a little more. Home health aid, $6,300 a month, right? Assisted living facility for a $5,300 a month. A semi-private room in a nursing home, $8,700 a month. Like who's paying for that? Right. So a lot of seniors in the African American community rely on Medicaid. There's a waiting period. You still got to come out of so much. You can't have but 2 pennies to rub together. You know what I mean? It's all of these things, and they're not covering everything, right? And so again, which is why we in our community, some is because we want to, someone gets sick and we want to bring them home to care for them, right? But some of it is we just can't afford these costs.
Right.
So when you talk about the chronic illness, it will pay for insurance. It will pay for things like hospital visits and to have a nurse come into the house, because regular healthcare does not pay for that. And it can literally wipe a family out in financial ruins. NerdWallet had this article, and it said nearly 70% of 65-year-olds will eventually need long-term care services or support. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a staggering number.
That's a staggering number. And 68%, this was in 2019. I really couldn't find any updated percentages, but 66% of bankruptcies were linked to medical debt.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we sometimes, the same way that you pay that phone bill every month, the same way that you pay, Netflix and cable and all of that stuff, this isn't a bill. It really is an investment in you. And somewhere we have to figure out, I'm worthy and I deserve this really great care. I remember when Papa died and he was in hospice in 2016. Beautiful facility. This was 2016. It was $5,000 a month, just room and board. Ain't nobody didn't put you in the shop. None of that, right? It was just room. I can't imagine how much it would be right now.
Yeah.
And so I have the ability to, through the Amazing Woman Network, we have this really, really great policy. It's because the other thing, there's a ton of people in our community that have no life insurance and think that they can't get it or haven't been able to get it because they have some chronic illness, cancer, renal failure, kidney, whatever it is, right? And so, or if they have some other kind of illness, it's cost prohibitive for it. Thanks to a guy, and I have to give him the shout out because I love our people, Gerald Scruggs Sr. went to the insurance company and said, hey, I need a true guaranteed issue, no questions asked life insurance policy. And they did it. They said yes. So no questions asked. And I'm meeting with them tomorrow to get the link to put it on the site for the Amazing Woman Network. So it will be live sometime this week. And I'm so excited about it because not only is it no questions asked, right? Up to like $80,000. And like, now, if you have no coverage to then be able to get up to $80,000 with no questions asked, come on, man, that's crazy, right? In addition to that, it has long-term care insurance that, okay, well, I need 2% of this pulled down every single month because for this long-term care to pay for whatever we pay for. There's also, you can also get a cancer policy, which will pay you if you are diagnosed with cancer. Plus, it covers all of this other stuff. And I mean, it's so inexpensive. It's absolutely crazy. Plus the critical illness policy. And it will also pay you if you get diagnosed with these things. But think about the travel that you have to do. I got to go. I have a friend who had cancer and he went to John Hopkins for treatment and he was there for quite a few months. They had to pay for room and board. He didn't have any of the, you know what I mean, out of pocket. So it literally is something that can keep a family from, again, financial ruin, but also give that caregiver some support because caregiving is hard.
Right.
And I always say, I love my child and I believe my child loves me enough that if something happened, she would say, no, I would take care of you. But I don't want her to give up part of her life in order to be able to do that. Right. So that's why things like this is so important.
That is exciting. Thank you for sharing that information. And folks, stay tuned to the platform so that when that drops, you have first access to be able to have that conversation, learn more about it, and to get that policy. Well, you'll be second in line because I'll be first.
Right.
Because I am clear, there's always more that we could be doing to ensure the safety and the comforts of those that are coming behind us. And the more you know, the better you are. So, Crystal, thank you for making space for this very important conversation that we need to put on repeat. If there is ever one that needs to be shared, this is that conversation because it touches so many. We are one illness, one car accident, one whatever away. And because of the domino effect of the foods that we eat, right, like are rapidly increasing the number of us that are dealing with different kind of cancers, different kind of autoimmune diseases, right? So these things are connected. Please don't allow your dominoes to tumble and you not be prepared on the back end of
and
what.
Don't think that you're young and you don't need the critical illness, right?
Correct.
Because it's covering those critical illnesses, and they cover what they call activities of daily living, ADL. So, eating, being able to transfer from bed to, chair, dressing yourself, bathing, things of that nature. It can come from a car accident, a sports injury, or complications from childbirth. So it's not just the seniors that need critical illness and cancer policies. It's at every age. And I know everybody on this phone call knows someone who is under 50 who's had a stroke or a heart attack. Right. So, and remember, anytime with insurance, the younger you are, the least expensive that it is. So yeah. And again, Crystal at Crystal Gunn, if you know someone who doesn't have insurance and because they have some sort of medical issue that is prohibiting them from getting it at all or makes it really cost preventive, then add that in the email when you email me, and we'll definitely make sure you get it, because there at this point there's no reason why people should not, what I mean, like no reason why people should not have insurance.
Thank you for paying attention to what's happening in our communities and loving us enough to teach us and to want us to be in a better place. I say it every week and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for the obedience that God has put on your life to create platforms like this where we can have these conversations. Thank you for allowing a space that many of us run from to be your jam, that you love us enough to tell it and tell it over and over again, to give this gift free in many spaces and be willing at cost, folks, hear me when I say all of it isn't free, to go deeper, to really understand how do you create that wealth? How do you create and share that knowledge so that the folks that you touch can be in a better place financially, which then tags onto emotionally, which then tags onto spiritually, which then tags on to, right? Like it's a domino. So thank you, Crystal, for willing to share your gift with the world. One more time, you make folks better in spaces that they have not physically been with you. You are truly a gift to this world. And I thank you for loving us enough to share that.
Can you imagine knowing me and having access to me and not getting this information that you need? Like, that's absurd to me.
It is. And in full transparency, every time I hear you talk, there's one more thing that I know I need to get in front of you about, because it is so deep and it is forever growing. And every time I have to rethink about my life, the living part of it, and what I want for my children and their children who are not even here, I know that those conversations need to happen over and over again. Yes. Thank you.
So everybody do me a favor. I say it at the end of every show, but Amazing Women Speak is sponsored by the Amazing Woman Network, which was created to unite and empower Black women globally, focusing on the pillars of reclaiming personal power, mind, body, and spirit, reclaiming our financial power, and increasing our social involvement. So go on over to Amazing Woman, WOMAN, AmazingWomanNetwork.com, and just up at the top, hit the join button. Now, anybody, you don't have to be a Black woman to get the insurance. Anybody can get that. But go ahead over there. And that way, when that email goes out, you definitely will have that as well. And also, please find Amazing Women Speak on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Spotify. And whatever your favorite platform, share, and subscribe. Find the videos that speak to your soul and share them with other people. Don't be a gatekeeper on the rest of the episodes, but definitely don't be a gatekeeper on this. As you can tell, I love what I do. It is a no judgment zone. Y'all come to the workshops that I'm doing free in 2025. We have a good time. I promise you, they're not stuffy. Y'all can tell. But you're going to get the information that you need. I absolutely love it. I am Crystal Gunn. I am a Black woman, and I definitely own my amazing.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Thank you all. Thank you for hanging out past the hour.
Yeah.
You have been blessed with information, I am sure. I hope you took great notes. And as Crystal said, please share this conversation with others. Collectively, we are stronger together. My name is Michele Harper. I'm a Black woman, and always without apology, I own my amazing.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your night. The Lions are on, so go Lions. Goodbye.